Good morning and welcome back. It is now August the 26th. Beautiful morning out here. Really light dew last night, so I'm sure the combine's going to be running again here within an hour or so as things warm up. It's supposed to be 25, 26 degrees for most of this week, but chance of rain on Wednesday, so we'll have to see what that does. But let's take a look at what's going on. Well, there's still some fields of barley left to combine. This field did still have a few green heads in it last week, but you can see that there's no real sign of any visible green heads in here now. Things have dried down pretty good. These heads are pretty good and dry and ripe, so I'm sure we will be in here probably this week to get these taken off. Well, lots of the corn is looking really good this week. This field of 1027 is a good 10, 11 feet tall. It's a few feet taller than I am, so things are looking pretty good in here. Got some pretty nice size ears starting to develop here. So these guys have been, pollinated or fertilized about as good as you could expect at this point. It's a little too early to tell how good a fill we got at the tip, but these kernels are just starting to fill out. So it's still a little early to say, but so far potential looking pretty good. We just need to make sure this field keeps wet for the next week or two while these guys all fill out. Here in this little puddle in an irrigated field, I see something that I usually see a few times a year, but it's not super common. This dark patch in this little pool of water is actually springtails. These are tiny, tiny little insects. They basically live in the pore spaces of the soil where they feed on decomposing organic matter and a few other things. And they are basically a beneficial insect, but occasionally when you get a heavy rainfall event or it pass irrigation that saturates the soil, you'll see them all float up in these puddles, and I usually get a few phone calls about them every year, so that's what those are. I'll show a blow-up picture here as well. Dryland durum is ripening and drying down rapidly and looking not too terribly bad. Could be a bit thicker, but hey, this is what you get in a drought year. So taking a quick hand sample here. I haven't run the mini combine in here yet, but actually kernel size and color looks not too terribly bad. I was really worried this field was not going to fill out at all because it really ran out of moisture at flower timing and was really struggling to fill to begin with. Overall though, now that seed sample's not looking too terribly bad. You can see we do have some sawfly in this field here. We got quite a few heads down towards the ground there, but I think it's nothing that the combine won't be able to pick up, so we should be good to go in here. Safflower crop doesn't look too much different than it did last week, just a little bit drier. We'll know more in the next couple weeks how well these seed heads are going to fill out. This field of lentils by Lethbridge, it was desiccated last week with Regulon Ion, and now it is ready to harvest. So overall, lentils have dried down pretty well. There were still a few lime green patches in the field when this was sprayed. There was also, right along the field edges here, there's quite a bit of kochia and Russian thistle. The Russian thistle we got really good control on. You can see it has burned down quite nicely. The kochia not quite so well. You can see these ones. We've basically blown all the leaf material stuff off. The stem is still fairly tough. Some of these larger ones here, you can see we've kind of burned off the tips, but we have a lot of green growth remaining. And some of that has to do with the direction of spraying as well. Sometimes on these really thick kochia patches, like along the edge of the field, you'd be well advised to hit it with Regulon go in one direction and then the other, so that you can get better coverage on some of those weeds. But overall, these lentils right now, because they have been desiccated, they are ready to come off. So we're going to get these done this week. Down here by McGrath, you can definitely see the effects of last Friday's thunderstorm that rolled through this area. There's quite a few stems here that have lost their heads. So, probably somewhere around, 10 to 15%. Lots of these guys have totally busted off. So there's definitely going to be some lost yield here if we can't pick all these heads up with the combine. Only time will tell for sure. Hopefully we can make some more progress today because tomorrow is supposed to be a rainy one. Still some peas coming off the field here and there. This particular farm is a little slow at harvesting because of a proliferation of weddings at harvest time. But they are busily working on the peas now, and they should be done here in the next hour or two, and then on to more barley. I thought I was going to see more heads emerging on the sorghum this week, and there is a couple more heads coming out this week, but they're still pretty few and far between. I think give it another week, especially after we get some rain, we should start to see more coming out here. This field of barley was taken off a few weeks ago for silage, and now you can see we got a kochia patch here that has had some significant regrowth. Now this just did get sprayed 2 days ago with Black Hawk and glyphosate, and you can actually already see some twisting and some burning going on some of these upper bits of foliage, mostly from that group 14 that's in the Black Hawk. So hopefully we'll see some mortality here. Now, post-harvest spraying is always a little bit of a tricky topic sometimes, but you know, if this was brand new stubble that had just been, you know, harvested in the last day or two, I would say, you know, hold on and wait. Even if you have a kochia patch like this, if you're cutting it off down at stubble height, you need to give it, you know, minimum of a couple days to recover from that stress event before you spray it. You know, ideally you want to wait until you get a rain shower on it, because it's going to be pretty tough and hardened off. You want it, same rules as spraying any other time in the season. If you're spraying a target species, you want it to be actively growing and healthy when you do spray it. You do not want it to be in stress mode. You want it to be able to uptake that herbicide and get it to work within it. So that's my rules for that. We'll probably, you know, after this rain here that they're forecasting tomorrow, should be some, you know, pretty good opportunities in the next week or two to do some post-harvest weed control. Here in this field of fall rye, we got quite a crop of volunteer coming up, which isn't too terribly surprising. So this field was combined, and rye does tend to shell out when it gets mature. So we do find a fair bit on the ground, especially where the swaths were laying. Now, when it comes to fall rye and winter wheat, you are much better off to spray out the volunteer in the fall rather than wait for the spring, for a couple reasons. If you were to let this overwinter, it's going to be in the vegetative state in the spring, which is usually when it's the most allelopathic towards other plants. So if you spray it out and then tried to seed something small seeded like canola, alfalfa, flax into it, you could end up seeing a decrease in your stand because of that. Same thing with winter wheat, you know. So, and secondly, these rye plants will be, you know, vegetative stage in the spring. They're going to be quite tall. They're going to be aggressive. You spray them out and you're just going to end up with a whole lot of surface trash you got to try to seed through, and the new crop has to basically compete with and get through to get to light. So once again, better off spray this out in the fall. You know, this field, we could come in here now, but with rain in the forecast, you know, we're going to wait another week or two, maybe see if we can get more of it up, take care of it all in one pass. Well, my first field of dryland canola has been harvested. I haven't gotten any yield numbers on it yet, but I think it'll probably be okay, or as good as can be expected with the dry soil conditions in this field. Like, you can just see, you know, how large these cracks in the ground are here. It is pretty dry in this field. Well, we still have lots of fields of oats showing symptoms from barley yellow dwarf virus. We also did spray enforcer in here, which has kind of burned off these weeds, which makes it look a little bit browner and yellower than it actually is. But you can see this field is pretty badly affected. Now, this is Arborg oats, and Arborg is a variety that is actually listed as S or susceptible to barley yellow dwarf virus. There is some varieties for next year, keep in mind, that are intermediate resistant or resistant, such as Wesley, so lots of those will be available through various seed sellers for next year, if that's something that you are concerned with repeating this condition. Seed timing also has a really big role to play in how well oats can tolerate a disease like barley yellow dwarf virus. So, for example, the difference between this field and this field is about 10 days of seeding difference. This field was seeded kind of right at the very end of June, which allowed the plants to get ahead and more developed before they got affected by yellow dwarf. Now, there is definitely yellow dwarf in this field. You can see that stereotypical red coloration on these leaves, and there is stunted plants mixed in, but there is enough plants that are unaffected by it, or, you know, relatively minorly unaffected, that they are now in head timing, and these heads are starting to fill. Also, this field was a little more advanced and the weeds kind of got away on us, so we didn't get any weed control in here. Hence, we have a lot of extra biomass from pigweed and lamb's quarters in here. But that's the big difference here, seed timing. Well, we're starting to rain pretty good out here now. I think the forecast is for about an inch of rain today, so I think field activities are pretty much done for the day. Don't think there's going to be any harvesting going on today, although I'm sure there's going to be some canola getting swathed. Well, we ended up getting about 1 3/4 inches of rain in this area yesterday, so things are very wet and soggy. Harvest is definitely on hold for now. Probably won't see anything going on today, but I bet by tomorrow some of the standing grain will be dry enough to go again. But in the meantime, it's an excellent time to get into a canola field like this, do some swathing while moisture conditions are good. So that's exactly what I'm going to do in some of my little small plots here. I'm going to get these guys effectively swathed, because the rest of this field is going to get swathed around it later today. Well, it didn't take too long to get done. So there's 8 little tiny swaths here now. I'll give this about 10 days to dry down, and I'll be in here with the little mini thresher kit and get this harvested, and we'll see if we get some usable data out of it. You know, I wasn't planning on taking this plot to yield. This was more meant to be just a demonstrator trial, so it's not replicated, so the data out of it won't be perfect, but at least it'll be something that I wasn't expecting to have some numbers to play with during the winter. Well, we're still pretty wet out here right now, but with 25 degrees and the sun shining, it's not going to last for long. I think some acres are going to start to come off as soon as this evening, quite possibly, as long as the fields are not too muddy. But I think we'll be back in the swing of harvest in the next day or two for sure. It is supposed to be a very nice weekend. I think we're supposed to be 30 degrees on Saturday here, so hope you guys have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week.